5 seconds to the open. You ready?
Who wants to get this thing started right about now?
Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly with your host, Jerry Robinson.
Welcome.
Not just some guru.
Oh, really?
Your host is an economist and a best-selling author.
What an interesting news item. I'd better write that down.
And just someone who likes to make money and help you to make money. Welcome to Follow the Money Weekly. And here he is, Jerry Robinson.
Friends, welcome to you all around the world. Welcome to Follow the Money Radio. So grateful to have you. As you just heard, my name is Jerry Robinson. I'm an economist and an author, and here to help you as you are on your journey to financial freedom. We got a great show lined up for you today. As you can see from the title, we're calling this, Are You Ready for the Green Gold Rush? And of course, we're talking about the advent of cannabis, Cannabis, which we are seeing, by the way, an explosion of demand all across the world right now. And we're going to be talking about this. And as always, I'm joined by my wife, Jennifer. Great to have you here today, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jerry. It's good to be here. You know, we follow trends here. We're called Follow the Money. We have a trend trading system called the Profit Tracker. Jerry, a lot of trends that we're following right now, we've been following the massive debt bubble and debt situation for a decade now. We've been following the retirement ticking time bomb for a long time. These are trends that we follow, trends that we use to help our financial lives and even to profit from cryptocurrency, the trend in the rise of China. But this one that we're going to talk about today is the cannabis trend. And Jerry, just so our listeners kind of get an idea, what drew you to this trend? What first got you started following this particular trend?
Well, cannabis as a drug or as a plant, we should really say, it's really ultimately just a commodity. And I began researching cannabis several years ago, trying to figure out, first of all, I got to say, as a believer, as a Christian, I had to deal with my own moral issues with this. I had to say, look, is this an immoral thing? Is it a moral thing? And the more I dug into the history of cannabis, I was so unbelievably surprised by what I found. What I found was quite shocking. And really, it changed my mind about what cannabis really is. And so I really began to be pro-medical marijuana several years ago. I actually went out to different states that were doing it, especially Colorado, just to kind of see what was happening. And, I just really have to say, I feel compassion for people who want to have some sort of pain relief, but don't want to have to take opioids. They don't want to have to risk their lives by taking pharmaceutical drugs that have been known to kill and maim people. And so they're looking for pain relief, even people who are suffering from cancer or people who are suffering from different types of epilepsy, even children. So when you go back and you research the laws of cannabis, I think it's really interesting. So anyway, I dove into this a while back, and through my research, I began to look at different companies, and I found that there were many different ways to play the cannabis boom. You didn't necessarily have to play just the recreational side. You could actually play the medical side. You could focus specifically on maybe even CBD oil, which is really popular now, and it's becoming more popular, especially after the big 2018 Farm Bill, where President Trump made hemp legal across the entire country. And so we're seeing a kind of a blossoming, or, pardon the pun there, but kind of a blooming, if you will, of this industry. And I think that it's there's a lot more upside to come.
Yeah, I remember several years ago, one of the main reasons that you always talked about was the opioid crisis and the people who actually die, the many people who actually die because they are hooked on opioid painkillers. And that was one of the major reasons I remember that drew you to this space.
Yeah, not only just they die, but their quality of life is just diminished. I mean, there's people who take these opioids, they don't even remember events. You know, they don't have a high quality of life. And I think when you're looking for some sort of relief, pain relief, you need to have something that's not going to, you know, obviously potentially kill you and cripple you. And that costs outrageous amounts of money. But on top of that, you know, that gives you a poor quality of life.
Okay, so let's get the big elephant in the room out in the open and just talk about the tainted imagery that many Americans and even people around the world have of cannabis. So you think of the Cheech and Chong movies and all that silly type of imagery. And you alluded earlier to the morality of cannabis. So let's discuss that right now.
Sure. Okay. So, you know, let's just take a look at the history of cannabis. You know, when we take a look at the history of cannabis, we've seen three primary uses throughout time. We've seen the industrial use. We've seen a lot of different industrial applications. You know, in America, for example, the Puritans, even George Washington himself was a hemp farmer. The Puritans, you know, had hemp. In fact, the sails and the lines of the Mayflower ship that brought over the Puritans to the United States of America were composed of hemp. And what's so ironic about all of that is that, you know, according to the laws, just until recently, you know, George Washington and the Puritans would have been thrown in jail, you know, just simply for growing a plant. Then there's also medical applications. You know, we've seen cannabis used as medicine for a very long time throughout history. What many people don't even know is the Bible itself. The Gutenberg Bible was printed upon hemp paper. The original King James Bible was printed upon hemp paper. It's been used for rope, paper, clothing, so many different things like that. And then there's also recreational use. You know, throughout time, people have used this drug recreationally. But when you take a look at the, going back to the medical use for a moment, you know, back in the 1800s, the 1700s, even in the early 1900s, you know, cannabis was used as a medicine. It was a natural medicine, and many people are getting back into natural medicine now. They're tired of the big pharma. They're tired of all of the, you know, the different chemicals and the drugs. And they're trying to get a more natural approach. Well, cannabis is about as natural as it gets. It just pops right up out of the ground. It grows like a weed, literally. And in the early 1900s, people used cannabis for pain relief. And it wasn't until, you know, toward the beginning of the century, especially in the 1930s, that it became associated with Mexican immigrants coming up from Mexico into the United States. And remember, this was in the post-prohibition era where prohibition against alcohol had ended, and you had so many different federal workers who were now facing, you know, a life without a job. What were they going to ban now that alcohol was legal? And marijuana became a perfect, you know, replacement for alcohol. And I'm going to quote you something. I've quoted this a few times in other places, and I think this is very important for you to hear, is that back in the 1930s, there was a real big buildup to ban cannabis and to really outlaw cannabis across the country. And it was led by the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. His name was Henry Anslinger. And I'm going to quote you something that he's sitting right in front of Congress, and he's building the case as to why cannabis should be banned across the country. Now, remember, up until this point, everyday people, including people of faith, right? I mean, it wasn't just people who were not of faith. Everybody, people of faith, people not of faith, they had used cannabis because it was a natural element. It helped different medical problems. And we know that even from recent research that shows that cannabis provides a lot of pain relief and many other things as well. But this is what Henry Anslinger, the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, said to Congress. He said, marijuana, quote, I'm quoting him now, marijuana, this is from the transcripts of Congress, marijuana is the most violence-causing drug in the history of mankind. Most marijuana smokers are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. And then he goes on to say that reefer, makes the darkies, he's referring, of course, to black people, reefer, and by the way, reefer means marijuana, reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white men. Do you hear what I just said? This is a man standing before Congress explaining to them why they should make cannabis illegal. Reefer makes the darkies think they are as good as white men. The primary reason, Anslinger says, to outlaw marijuana. What do you think his answer is? Do you think it's because it hurts young people? Do you think it's because it's immoral? Do you think it's because it causes public health issues? None of those are the case. Let me tell you what the primary reason the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics in the 1930s said was the primary reason to outlaw marijuana is because of its effects upon the degenerate races, end quote. Now, this was coupled with all kinds of propaganda films that were put out by Hollywood at this same time with interests that were trying to shut down this industry. So you had Reefer Madness. Many people might remember that particular movie. And so in my research, what I discovered was that cannabis was demonized specifically as a way to target minorities. And in fact, when you take a look at the actual drug war today that's going on, that still continues, that was ramped up in the 1980s, and that continues even to this day, it overwhelmingly targets minorities. Minorities are some of the people that are the most hurt by the current war on drugs. And so I got to be honest, from my research, everything that I've read, everything that I've studied, it tells me that this particular war on cannabis has really been rooted in a lot of racism. And it's sad to say, but that's really the case. And when you go back in time, what you'll discover is that, and let's speak about the morality about this real quickly too, Jennifer, before we move on, is that, let's talk about morality for a minute. I mean, you want to talk about morality? Well, what about usury? I mean, usury used to be completely immoral in the Christian church. The Christian church for the first 1,500 years said that the charging of interest in any form was absolutely positively banned. It was immoral. It was completely wrong. It was an unnatural use of money. Even Martin Luther himself said that no one should charge usury. Today, do we charge usury? Do people of faith, do Christians actually transact and charge interest and actually earn from interest? Of course they do. So what happened to that immoral act of usury? It's gone. And now it's moral today. What about interracial marriage? I mean, if you go back to the early 1900s and you survey Christians and you ask them, is interracial marriage inappropriate, or is it wrong, or is it immoral? You would find that the majority of them said that it was immoral. Now today, how many Christians would tell you that interracial marriage is immoral, right? And then let's think of also another one. I mean, let's think about segregation. For a long time, the idea of blending the races in schools and whatnot was considered absolutely immoral by Christians. Today, that's not the case. So you have to ask yourself, if cannabis was not considered an immoral plant, an immoral substance, up until the 1930s in the United States, and then suddenly we changed our mind on it, you have to ask yourself, how legitimate is that moral question that we have about cannabis?
And also, Jerry, I'm thinking about a comparison issue, the issue of alcohol. Alcohol is completely legal. If you're 21, you can walk up to a liquor store and buy as much alcohol as you wish. And then you can drink as much as you wish, even enough to kill yourself, literally, or others if you got behind the wheel of a car. And so I think to claim that cannabis is a moral issue, I mean, it's like you said, it's really kind of a bogus thing to use the morality of it as a way to say it shouldn't be legal, or to say you shouldn't even invest in a company that's growing because of this.
Absolutely. So I think the morality question is simply a red herring. I think it's completely, I think that's going away. It's not something that's really legitimate anymore because the racist roots of these laws are being exposed. But I think also, too, as you pointed out with alcohol, I mean, alcohol will kill you. I mean, it'll kill people, and it's completely legal. And so anyone who says, well, this is a public health matter, you have to show me one person who's died from cannabis. But for every person you show me there, I'll show you 100,000 that have died from cigarettes and have died from alcohol. And where is the moral outrage on these things? They're completely legal. You can walk into the store and, as Jennifer said, buy as much as you want. So let's not banter about this public health nonsense about cannabis. There is no evidence that it causes any kind of public health dangers anywhere on the level of, say, alcohol or cigarettes.
So, Jerry, now that cannabis is growing in legal status widely across the United States, it's been legalized completely at the federal level in Canada. Let's talk about the explosive growth potential of this industry. I think a lot of people may be wondering, is it too late to start investing in it? Have the profits been made, or is it just beginning?
Yeah, I would build the case that we're in the very, very, very early innings. I mean, remember, we're in an environment where it's still completely illegal. I mean, if you take a look at the FDA's scheduling, you'll find that marijuana is a Schedule I drug. So, that ranks marijuana right alongside things like heroin and LSD. And the FDA considers anything that's a Schedule I drug as something that has the highest potential for abuse and that has currently no accepted medical use in the United States. And for that reason, because of the scheduling that they have done with marijuana, it has prevented studies from being done. Even though there have been people who have been renegade and went on to do that, many universities and researchers are afraid to study this because they're afraid of the kind of repercussions that there could be. They could lose funding, federal funding. And so you have the idea that because it's still a Schedule I drug, simply a rescheduling, which the FDA can do very simply. They can certainly go in and reschedule drugs. They have done it before. They can do it again. And so simply by rescheduling cannabis, say down to Schedule II, and let me give you an example of what's on the Schedule II in the FDA. We're talking about things like crystal meth, PCP, cocaine. I mean, these are the kinds of drugs that can kill you, of course. Oxycodone, this is also a Schedule II drug. I mean, to put marijuana in any of these classes, again, it seems to be wildly overkill. So the profit potential in my mind is simply the rescheduling of marijuana to something more sensible. We could even see a descheduling of it, and that would be the best of all worlds for investors. Now, there was a study that was put out. Actually, there was a really important survey, I should say, that was put out, a report called The Health Effects of Cannabis and Cannabinoids back in 2017. And this was a landmark study that reviewed more than 10,000 scientific abstracts published since 1999. And what this report found was that there was evidence to support that cannabis was more likely to help people with a significant reduction in pain symptoms. They found substantial evidence that these medications, when orally ingested, could improve symptoms in many other types of diseases, including chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. So there was lots of conclusive evidence that cannabis has, tremendous medical properties, and that's just scratching the surface. I mean, the reports that we have seen show that the THC, which is one compound of cannabis, but also CBD, which is the non-psychoactive version of or a compound that comes out of cannabis, provides many different benefits: anti-inflammatory benefits, appetite stimulant benefits, antipsychotic, antispasmodic, anti-diabetic, antibacterial. So there's all different kinds of benefits, and this is just from the limited type of research that has been able to be done upon this plant. And so as we move forward, what we see is explosive growth. I mean, it's very difficult to determine the current size of the cannabis black market right now, in 20 17, the actual figure that was guesstimated was about $40 billion. And if you take a look at the total market cap of legal U.S. cannabis market, it's somewhere around that. But I mean, whenever you imagine the total black market that's out there, people actually buying cannabis from people on the street, when that actually is moved to safe, or federally or state regulated, dispensaries, what is going to be the size of this market? It's quite astonishing. So I think there's three reasons why legal U.S. cannabis could explode higher in the coming years. Number one is that we have a lot of legal fears and social stigmas. Many potential U.S. cannabis users live in states where the plant is still illegal, and they largely avoid it out of a fear of embarrassing police encounters, massive fines, harsh prison sentences, etc. And when this plant is finally legal across the U.S., we expect that many first-time users will try cannabis and will become semi-regular or to regular consumers. So you have that. But then secondly, you have new methods of ingestion. So the old, Cheech and Chong idea of, smoking a big old, joint or whatever. I mean, that's not the only way to ingest cannabis. There are many other ways. And in fact, companies like Coke and Pepsi are getting involved in looking at potentially having cannabis-infused drinks. We also see edibles that are certainly growing, oils that promise to open up a market to a new whole generation of non-smoking consumers who may never have otherwise considered trying cannabis, either in CBD form, which is the non-psychoactive form, or THC, which is the psychoactive form. And then finally, you have, big pharma market share competition. I mean, in addition to the current recreational market, vast new medical applications for cannabis could lead to explosive future growth. And this is especially true due to the non-lethal pain-relieving power of cannabis. You cannot die from getting pain relief from cannabis, as opposed to the deadly narcotic painkillers that are presently laying waste to Americans, simply seeking the same pain relief that cannabis offers. So you have all of those reasons, and probably many more that we don't have time to go into, but the opportunity becomes even more compelling when you take a look at global growth estimates. We're talking about a potential $200 billion market here, and the institutional inflows have yet to arrive. I mean, we still don't have several things. We still don't have institutions investing in this space en masse, so this is one of those rare moments where individuals could actually get ahead of the curve and actually be positioned before the big money comes in this particular market. But secondly, you have an industry that's completely in its infancy. There is no brand loyalty here. I mean, no one knows, what kind of brand to go buy when they go into a dispensary. I mean, very few do. Brand awareness, is something that most people don't even know. I mean, if you walk into a liquor store and you want to buy a bottle of wine, for you and your wife, or maybe you want to go out and buy a 6-pack of beer, when you walk into the liquor store, you kind of know some of the different brands. And there's a lot of different brands that you may not know, but there's a lot of brands that you've been told about, you've learned about through advertisements and whatnot. That has not occurred yet in the cannabis space, but it will. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see brand awareness turn into brand loyalty. And so savvy investors who can kind of read the tea leaves right now and can begin doing research on this space could really position themselves well for explosive profits ahead as more people become brand savvy and then brand loyal.
Yeah, Jerry, wasn't there just in the Super Bowl back last month, there was an ad about the potential benefits of cannabis in diseases, and it was denied a spot in a Super Bowl advertisement.
That's right. They prefer to push beer commercials and other things like that. But yeah, that's really quite something. Really quite something.
I think a lot of people are liking this trend right now, are looking at the cannabis trend and how to invest in it. And I think where a lot of people get stuck is which stocks to buy. And so, Jerry, when people are trying to figure this out, how to look for a good stock that will grow, has good growth potential, what should they look for?
Well, it's a really good question, and it really depends upon the individual, because there's so many different ways, to to get involved in this space, first of all, we got to say, be sure to do your own due diligence. And you really want to spend some time researching this on your own. You want to drill deeper. And when you do, here's the things that I look for. I'll just share these with you. First of all, the experience of the management team. That's extremely crucial because this is a new space. It's difficult to find people who have a large amount of experience, in the cannabis industry. So where you find most of that is really been in the Canadian market. Has been in the Canadian market. So there are quite a few Canadian stocks that we like, that we presently own. And we like, finding companies that have deep experience in the management team. And do they have experience in the types of markets that the company is targeting? For example, if the company wants to open up a bunch of retail outlets for, their cannabis, products, does the executives team have retail experience? You want to make sure that the experience that they have matches their aims and goals. And then secondly, corporate management should have a solid network. I mean, this is really key. We just saw Aurora Cannabis, for example, just recently pick up a billionaire hedge fund manager and activist investor named Nelson Peltz. And, Nelson Peltz has tremendous experience in the consumer goods space, and he's going to be helping Aurora Cannabis roll out, their products, globally. And because he has such a deep network, and because he knows so many people, and because he's worked with so many top brands, this caused the stock to pop. And so that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for companies that are taking on advisors, strategic advisors, or management, people to their management team that have a solid network to help them leverage opportunities as we go forward, especially if they have, connections within the government. Many of these are doing that as well. And I think that's very, very smart to help them kind of know what government is thinking. And then third of all, I would say that we want to see solid insider ownership by shares by top executives, without a whole lot of insider selling. I mean, if the company's executives don't want to own, the company itself, then, why should you? That's kind of philosophy that I have. So that would be a red flag if you saw some excessive or unusual amounts of insider selling, or if you just don't see a lot of executives owning, the stock. You want them to have some sort of skin in the game. And there's a few other things too as well. And Jennifer, we've gone into this. We've actually created a really great report on the cannabis space.
Yeah, I was going to say that if that sounds daunting to you, if you've never done that type of research before on a stock, we've done a lot of that heavy lifting for you. And we have a 2019 cannabis stock report that you can just go hop online to followthemoney.com, click the shop button, go to our online store and pick that report up. You get instant access to it, and you can learn more in depth about the cannabis industry, more than what you've heard on the podcast today. You can learn all about the long-term growth prospects of the industry, how to identify high-quality cannabis stocks, as Jerry was just talking about. We go more in depth in the report. And then we talk about 7 of these cannabis stocks that we actually own. Jerry and I own these personally, and also 5 others that we also like for long-term growth potential. And then last of all, if you are a platinum member with us, then you get real-time alerts via our private Twitter feed when we buy or sell or change a position of our cannabis holdings, which is really nice.
This is a space that I plan on being in for the next 5 to 10 years. I think this is a long-term opportunity to be positioned in a space that is going to continue to see lots of good news. So every time a state legalizes, you're going to see these cannabis stocks pop. New Jersey right now is on the horizon looking at legalizing cannabis. And then even at the 2020 election, you're going to see potentially a descheduling or a rescheduling of cannabis, and that's going to cause these stocks again to burst higher. So every time something happens, every time another state, you have only 10 or 11 states so far have legalized recreational. So every time another state does that, you're going to see a spike in these stocks. So I think you got a long runway here to make quite a bit of money. And even though a lot of money has already been made, I think we're still in the very early innings. And I encourage you to go check out this report we've done. We're offering it right now for a ridiculously low price. And the price is going to go up but we were offering it right now at a very good introductory price. But like Jennifer said, you get the 2019 Cannabis Investment Report. It's a 20-page PDF report. We also put together a 90-minute video masterclass that'll introduce you to the world of cannabis investing. We also are going to provide you, as Jennifer said, with that investment portfolio of the stocks that we currently own. And on top of all of that, you're also going to receive in that masterclass, we're going to show you, if you've never actually bought a stock before, we're going to walk you through step by step how to actually purchase your very first cannabis stock. So it's a really great value. Again, Jennifer, you said you can go to followthemoney.com/shop, and there you can see our online store, and you'll see the cannabis report right there, the 2019 Cannabis Investment Report. You get all that information for one low price. I encourage you to go check it out. So I encourage you to take advantage of this limited time offer now. followthemoney.com/shop. Hey friends, this is Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly. Recently, we have been receiving many emails from our listeners commenting on the great help they're getting from our precious metals expert, Tom Cloud. Gold and silver are excellent hedges against the growing threat of coming U.S. inflation. Who's your gold guy? Make it Tom Cloud. With over 30 years experience with precious metals, Tom will answer all of your questions. Don't buy your gold and silver through some call center and pay inflated prices. Call my good friend Tom Cloud and speak directly with him and get all of your questions answered. For a limited time, Tom is offering free shipping and insurance on every gold and silver purchase made by our listeners. Call 800-247-2812. And when you do, tell him that Jerry Robinson from Follow the Money Weekly sent you, and he'll throw in that free shipping and insurance on your entire order. Call your gold guy, Tom Cloud, right now for the very best deals on gold and silver coins. 800-247-2812. That is 800-247-2812. All right, friends, well, that brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much for tuning in and allowing us to be a part of your life right here on this broadcast. And as always, I'd like to leave you with a final word. You know, I heard a great quote the other day that went something like this: don't judge your chapter 1 by somebody else's chapter 10. You know, we're all at different stages in our life. In our interconnected world, and especially with the advent of social media, many times it can feel like everybody but you has a picture-perfect life and is just so far ahead. But in reality, we're all living and learning one day at a time. The only thing that stands between where you are now and where you want to be are the decisions that you will make today, tomorrow, and each day afterwards. Remember, today is not the finish line. Keep moving in the direction of your calling. You will get there if you don't quit. Just don't give up. And that's just something to think about. Remember, friends, when you want the truth about the global economy, just follow the money. Have a safe and prosperous week, and we'll see you right back here next time. Until then, God bless.
All of the information contained on the Follow the Money podcast is strictly for informational and educational purposes. It should not be construed as specific investment advice. The views and opinions of our guests and sponsors are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of ftmdaily.com or Robinson Media Group, LLC. Jerry Robinson does hold an insurance license and at times may offer consulting on life insurance and fixed retirement income products. Follow-up, individualized responses to email or phone requests that involve the rendering of personalized investment advice for compensation will not be made absent compliance with state investment advisor registration requirements or an applicable exemption or exclusion and applicable insurance regulations. Past performance is not indicative of future results. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on the podcast. Remember, never do your financial planning through podcast or radio. It's your money. Be wise. Do your due diligence and always consult a trusted financial professional before making any financial decisions.